This next project admittedly isn't useful to everyone, but it's a really fun project and you might find a use for such a thing, even if you don't keep chickens. And the project for today is a chicken waterer. And these were a real staple product of the folk potters back not that long ago, before we had plastic chicken waterers or galvanized steel ones. And they're actually great. You just fill them up and turn them right side up, and when the water starts to leak down, it pulls a vacuum and it keeps the rest of it up in the body of the jar. There's just one little opening where the chickens drink, so they're pretty clean and tidy, and it's kind of a cool thing to get in touch with a folk tradition. I happen to have 8 very cute chickens in the backyard, and so I'm planning on using mine. I've got one in service already. So here goes. It's a fun closed form. You can take some of the techniques and apply them to other things if you don't keep pets that need an automatic waterer. All right, I've got a decent amount of clay here, probably 4 or 5 pounds, because I wanted a nice big one that I won't have to refill too often. So let's get it centered. And this is basically a closed form, and in the past I've made them by just closing up the top. But whenever you close a form, there's always a little tendency for a spiral crack to develop up there. And I want to show you a really kind of a cool way to close this form that involves throwing a little plug off the hump, setting it aside, and then inserting the plug right as I'm about to close the form. So it's something exciting, even if chicken watering isn't something you need to worry about. So I'm just going to center up this top little piece of clay and use the main piece of clay as a way to throw something off the hump. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this and form it into kind of a knob. Keep it nice and compressed. And we're just going to pull this up a little bit and make a nice tapered neck on it. Oops. It's not a lot of clay we're working with, so if I screw it up, it's not a huge deal. But I'm trying to get this right. All right, so that's going to be the knob. I'm going to make a little cut in it right at the base. Using the stick to make sure I've got a sharp corner. And then I'm going to make a groove. I think I'm just going to cut it all the way off with the wood knife. There it is. So that's going to be the plug that'll form the knob on the top of this chicken water, and I'll be poking a hole through that so that I could hang it in the chicken house if I wanted to. Normally I just put these on a brick or something to get them up off the ground. So that gets set aside. It's going to get rethrown, so I don't have to worry about it keeping it pristine. And now we're going to use the rest of this clay to form the body of the jar. Make sure it's good and centered. And I'm going to open down to a floor depth of about 1/4 inch. Nice thing about these is it's fine for them to be a little sturdy. I suppose if you were a farmer having to provide water for a whole chicken house worth of chickens with one of these, you'd want them to be as light and easy to move around as possible, but that's not my situation. So I'm going to come out as wide as I want the base to be, which is about like that. And just make sure this bottom is nice and compressed. I had to push a little clay back towards the center because I got carried away with my opening, as I often do. But I just am sweeping some clay back over that area that was too thin in the middle. All right, now let's go ahead and pull up these walls. I do use this left thumb to help gather in that thick clay and have it to come up and in rather than tending to want to flow outward. It's a trick I learned from Kyle, actually. I use it all the time now. I really like it. You keep this rim nice and compressed. And let's get this wall on up. No need to mess around. I am leaving the top a little bit on the thick side because whenever you're closing a form down, if you get it too thin, it'll wrinkle and ruffle instead of compressing. So I'm letting off and leaving a probably double thick top up here. One more pass to make sure I'm not leaving behind any good material down here at the bottom of the wall. Stand against the wheel until I feel like I've got it, and now I can come on up. All right, and this part's all done, so won't even finish the pull. I'm gonna dry out this inside because once I close it, it's gonna take it a long time to dry. And if I leave it with a soggy bottom, almost guaranteed I'll get a crack down there. And if these things have any cracks or openings anywhere, they don't work. You won't get that vacuum. Just trim the bottom with my wood knife. I want these things to have a little bit of a rounded bottom. I'll thumb that later when it's leather hard. And I'm gonna go ahead and rib everything because I want to get a lot of the slurry out of the inside and kind of refine the shape a little bit. So I've got my yellow rib for the inside and my metal rib for the outside. We'll just dry it down a little bit. I love taking all that goo off. I try not to overwork these working pots. You know, this isn't going to go sit on a shelf somewhere. This is going to be out in the yard for the chickens. So I want it to be really beautiful and elegant without a sense of fussiness. I want to just kind of get it done. So I'm going to go ahead and close this top down a little bit. Well, actually quite a bit. I want to get it closed down until I can still get my hand inside, but it's really starting to form a shoulder. There we go. All right. So that's the basic shape. I will go in with a rib and just kind of work this shoulder and make sure I'm real happy with that profile. I like the shoulder to be a little bit broader than the bottom. I think it just looks better. Let's see what a difference that one little stretch made. Looks more like a nice jug instead of just a boring cylinder. All right, now I'm going to close it down almost all the way. I want to insert that plug. So I'm going to do one of my favorite tricks, which is kind of pulling up along my middle finger, draw that wall in and toward close. Now right now I have 3 fingers inside. I got to get it down to where I have just 1 finger inside or 2 fingers inside. Just gradually keep taking it down to fewer fingers until I can only get 1 in there. And that's the moment where I know I'm ready to plug it up. All right, time for just 1 finger. I'm actually pulling the clay towards the center, and it's behaving. I am Always kind of paying attention that I don't get too much of a flat in this shoulder, because you can get it to collapse if you're not careful. I'm also cheating a little bit. My right thumb is on the side toward me, helping kind of push it closed around my finger. Get that down. Now, for a normal closed form, I would just take this and close it all the way down to nothing. But I have this cool little plug of clay that I pre-made. And so I'm going to kind of set this up so that it's like a little tiny necked jug, so that I can drop my pre-made little knob in that hole. Actually, I got it a little too small. All right, let's just go ahead and see if we can get that to go in there. At this point, it is full of air. So I've got that closed form. I'm going to kind of close the neck of the bottle around that plug of clay. And hopefully this is just going to be a more solid way of attaching that top. I think I'd like to get this top part of the knob a little bit wider, so I can kind of maybe put it between two fingers as I carry it over to the hose to fill it up. So I'm kind of pressing this down and shaping it up. Yeah, that's going to be nice. I'll be able to just kind of grab it and go. Very elegant for a chicken waterer. I'm going to take one more pass. I don't have an inside rib now, but I can sort of push against the air pressure and work this top part. Got a really nice full shoulder there. Boy, the chickens are going to love it. One last pass just to kind of make sure I love the profile. That's nice. Can't decide if I like that little detail there. I think I'm going to just blend it. All right. The very bottom looks a little bit wide to me, so I'm going to take the knife and just clean up that profile just a touch. Right after I talked about how I wasn't going to fuss over it too much. But I'm not on the clock. I don't have to make 100 of these by lunchtime. As long as I don't forget to take these things in when it's going to freeze, this should hold up for quite a while. They don't do well if you let the water freeze inside, because that water is going to expand and your clay is not. Make an absolute mess of taking this scrap off. I don't know why I didn't want to come off in one piece, but I'm going to be scraping it, which I don't like. All right, so I've got the overall shape. And I'm happy with it. So it's time to make the functional bit, which is the slot that's going to create the opening where the chickens will actually drink. So I'll clean up my hands a little bit and show you how I like to make a horizontal slot. it took me a while to figure out how to get these things to work. If you cut your slot with the knife held horizontally, they tend to just empty. They don't get that vacuum forming on the inside. So it's important to get that part right. I have, you want to hold most of your water up in this upper part and just dispense it down near the bottom. And if it's too far from the bottom, they won't be able to drink all of the water out of it. So I want to have my slot sort of near the bottom. And I'm going to use a knife to cut it. So this is my favorite Dolan knife, but an X-Acto blade works just fine. And you could probably use the tip of a sharp paring knife. But you basically just want something that's got a nice thin blade. And I need to cut a slot that's wide enough that the chicken can get his little face in there. So not super wide. And I'm just gonna make one. It's easier to have it fill and work right if you don't have multiple sides. They'll just have to take turns to get water. So a lot of times I'll put a layout line, but I know that I'm gonna be just turning the wheel to create my horizontal slot. So I won't even make a layout line. What I will do is drop my pinky to the wheel to keep my hand at the same height. And I've also got my arm braced against my leg. So I'm gonna come in and let's see. I think that's about a good height. I'm gonna insert the knife. And then I'm using my left hand to just turn the wheel. And that's plenty of space. Hopefully that stayed nice and level. It's always a bit confusing because I come up on a diagonal with the rib because it's moving upward. And I look at that line and go, boy, that looks really crooked. But hopefully it's flat. And I want to push in. And I'm going to kind of open this up like we did with the strawberry jar. So that's the basic shape. I want to open it up, but I got to be careful that I don't stretch it so much that that outer lip is lower than the inner part. Because this is all working on creating a vacuum. And if it just pours out, you've made a very complicated, not very effective water bowl. So pressing in, boy, I should turn to the side so you can see how I'm working. So I'm using the back of my finger to press the back of that slit inward. And then I'm going to use the front of my finger to flare it out a little bit. And that's really all there is to it. I don't need to get it any wider than that. Little chickens can get their head in there. Their beak isn't that big. And I'll just let that dry. When it's leather hard, I'm probably going to put a hole through the stem of this knob so that if I decide I want to hang it from a loop of wire or something to be able to hang it in their coop for winter, I can do that. And because I use that solid plug of clay inside there, I don't have to worry about hitting some kind of internal crack that's going to make it not hold the air, hold the vacuum. So that's your chicken water. That's the finished shape. And that's going to hold almost a gallon of water, which will keep them going for a good long while. You can certainly embellish these. I have put faces on them in the past. I've put a lot of decoration on them in the past. I've done some like combing decoration. You can get as fancy as you want. Obviously, it just depends on how fancy you want your chicken water to look. But this is going to be great. It's going to be easy to carry to the hose and to fill up, and it's going to hold that vacuum. I can see that the lip is higher up on the outside than it is on the inside. So that was the goal. Thought you might like to meet my chickens and understand why they need a water. That's Fife in the front, and then the rooster's back behind. You might be able to tell from the fluffy tail. Banjo, and Bongo, and all the friends. Here comes Spoons. Fife is the friendliest of them all. Here's a genuine chicken waterer that I made many years ago. It's got the little pocket that I showed you before. It's got the knob for carrying, and it's even got a little hole. Looks like some kind of creature filled that hole, but there was a hole for hanging. And so this one has held up for years and years. I'm going to show you how it gets filled. So you just take the hose. That would fill it up just at the bottom, but if you want to get it filled up all the way, you've got to turn it on its side. It's really hard to do one-handed. And set it over here. And we're just going to fill it up. Full. And the cool thing is, when you turn it upright, the water doesn't come out. It just sits there until they drink it. And as long as you got it somewhere where they won't scratch a bunch of junk up into it, it stays nice and clean because it's not exposed to the air. So that's the project. Now you know.